The bell in the high temple of Salmar had not rung in 900 years, and on the morning it rang, the acolyte Vale was the only one close enough to hear it begin. She was 11 seasons old by the reckoning of her people, the Salmari, small and gray-skinned and quick, and she had been sweeping the floor of the Skywatch chamber because no elder wished to. The chamber sat at the top of the temple spire, above the cloud line, where the air was thin, and the priest said the old gods had once walked. Vale did not believe in the old gods. She believed in the broom, and the dust, and the warm bowl of root paste waiting for her below. She was a practical child in a place that had no use for practical children. So when the great bell, the one cast from the hull of a fallen sky thing, and hung from chains thicker than her body, swung once on its own and let out a sound like a wounded star, Vale did not pray. She dropped her broom and ran to the window. The sky over Salmar was wrong. She had watched that sky every dawn of her short life. She knew its 3 moons, its slow green clouds, the pale ring of dust that crossed it from edge to edge. She knew where the trade ships of the Concordat crossed, small and tidy, their lights blinking in patterns she had memorized for fun. None of that was there now. The moons were hidden, the ring was hidden. The whole eastern half of the sky had gone dark, not with cloud, but with shapes, and the shapes were moving. Vale counted. She had always counted. It was the one thing she was good at. She counted 10 before she understood they were vessels. She counted 100 before her hands began to shake. She stopped counting at 1,000 because there was no point, because the dark shapes filled the sky from the horizon to the high, cold dome of heaven, and they kept coming, rank behind rank behind rank, each one larger than the temple, larger than the city, larger than anything the Salmari had ever built in their whole long history of building small. They did not blink like trade ships, they did not signal, they simply came, silent and gray and endless, and the morning light broke against their hulls and did not pass through. Below her, in the city, the first screams began. Vale stood at the window with the bell still shivering behind her, and she did the only thing her practical mind could do. She read the marks on the nearest hull, the great letters burned into gray metal in a script the Salmari had only ever seen in their oldest scripture, and she sounded them out the way the elders had drilled into her, letter by letter, because to read the holy script aloud was the first duty of any acolyte. The letters spelled a name. They spelled it on every hull, 10,000 times across the sky, and the name was the same name the priests sang in the dark of the longest night, the name that the Salmari had built this entire temple to remember and to fear. The name was Earth. And under it, on the lead vessel, the one so vast it had its own weather, smaller letters spelled the rest. A single ship name, picked out in light. Vale read it 3 times before she would let herself believe it. It said, Ardent Vigil. She did not know yet that this was the flagship. She did not know yet that the others, all 10,000 of them, were dreadnoughts, and that each dreadnought carried more firepower than the entire Salmari homeworld had ever possessed. She knew only the scripture, and the scripture was very clear on one point, repeated in every verse, carved over every door of the temple in which she had spent her whole life. The humans were not real. The humans were a story, a warning tale for children, a legend the elders told to explain why the Salmari must never grow proud, never reach too far, never wake the things that slept in the dark between stars. The humans were the gods of an old war, fierce and terrible and gone, ground to dust ages before the Salmari ever crawled up from their seas. That was the whole point of the legend. The monsters were dead. The danger was past. You could fear them safely, the way you feared a story. Vale looked at 10,000 dreadnoughts filling her sky, each one bearing the name of a thing that had been dead for 10 million years, and the practical part of her mind, the part that counted, said in a small, clear voice, "The legend is wrong." She would spend the rest of her life learning exactly how wrong. To understand what came down on Salmar that morning, you must first understand why the temple existed at all, and to understand that, you must go back before Vale, before the city, before the Salmari themselves ever looked up and gave the lights in the sky their proper names. The galaxy in those days was held by the Concordat of the Hollow Crown, and the Concordat held it through belief. This was not a thing the Salmari understood, and it was not a thing most species understood, because the Concordat had spent a very long time making sure they would not. The Hollow Crown did not rule with fleets. It did not rule with law, or trade, or fear of the lash. It ruled with a single perfect tool, a thing it had refined across 100 million years, until it was less a weapon than a law of nature, and that tool was the shaping of what a mind could believe. The Concordat could reach into the thoughts of a species, gently, slowly, over generations, and adjust what they held to be true, not their feelings, their facts. It could make a proud people believe they were small. It could make a free people believe they had always knelt. It could take a true thing, a dangerous true thing, and fold it down and down until it became a children's story, a thing you could hold in your hand and feel nothing. This is what the Concordat had done to the memory of Earth. There had been a war, once. The scripture of Salmar was not wrong about that part. There had been a war, the largest the galaxy had ever known, and on one side had stood the Hollow Crown with all its servant species, and on the other had stood a single young world that refused, simply and completely, to believe what it was told to believe. The Concordat had tried to shape the humans the way it shaped everyone. It had reached into their minds to make them small, to make them grateful, to make them kneel, and the humans had felt the hand in their thoughts, and instead of bending, they had done a thing no species had ever done before in the whole long reign of the Hollow Crown. They had reached back. Far below the spire, in the lower city of Salmar, a market keeper named Doran had been weighing root paste into a customer's bowl when the sky went dark, and he was, in his own small way, as important to what happened that morning as the acolyte at the high window, though he never knew it, and Vale never learned his name. Doran was not a believer. Few market keepers were. He had heard the appeasement songs his whole life the way he heard the temple bells, as a sound that meant the day was passing, and he had never once thought about what the words underneath them said. So when the great bell rang, and the gray hulls filled the sky, and the first screaming started in the upper streets, Doran did not run to the temple to be appeased. He stood in his stall with a half-filled bowl in his hand, and he looked up, and he thought the one practical thought that 100 priests in their gilded chambers did not think. He thought, those are ships, not gods, ships. He had loaded enough Concordat freighters in his time to know a hull when he saw one, and the things filling the sky over Salmar were hulls, gray and riveted and built, and a built thing has builders, and builders are people, and people can be talked to. It was the most ordinary thought in the world, and it was a kind of freedom. And Doran arrived at it on his own, from the bottom up, the same way Vale would arrive at the seam in the chamber far above him, because the splinter had folded the priests most deeply of all, and had spent rather less of itself on a market keeper who never came to the temple anyway. So when the certainty fell on the whole world at once, when the last crown reached into every Salmari mind and laid down its perfect handed-down thought, the humans are the enemy, complete the song, the humans lie, Doran felt it land on him too, and he felt it not fit. It came down whole and complete and certain, and Doran, who had spent 40 years learning by hand exactly how much a bowl of root paste weighed, and exactly how a hull was riveted, and exactly how a customer's face changed when you cheated them, felt the new certainty sitting wrong in him, the way a false weight sat wrong on his scale. He could not have named the seam the way Vale named it, but he was a man who weighed things for a living, and the certainty weighed wrong, and he set down the bowl, and he did not sing. He was not the only one. That was the thing the last crown had never been able to fix in 600 years of folding Salmar, and the thing it had hidden from the priests most carefully of all. The temple was folded, the scripture was folded, but a world is not only its temple, and there were market keepers and net menders and well diggers and stone cutters all across the lower city, who had spent their lives learning hard true things by hand, brick by brick, weight by weight, and the certainty weighed wrong on all of them, and one by one, in their stalls and their boats and their diggings, with no acolyte and no voice from the sky to help them, they set down what they were holding, and they did not sing. It was not enough to break the splinter. Only the refusal in the chamber, at the heart, could do that. But it was enough that when the certainty surged through Salmar that morning, it did not surge cleanly. It snagged on 1,000 small practical minds across the lower city, and the snag bought time, the few precious seconds the ardent vigil needed to find the book and burn it before the song could be completed, and Doran, standing in his stall with the certainty weighing wrong in his hands, never knew that his stubbornness about the weight of things had helped buy an acolyte 340 steps and one clear choice. This is a thing the humans understood that the splinter never did. In 100 million years of folding, the hand could reach a temple. The hand could reach a scripture, a priesthood, a holy script, the high and ceremonial places where belief was concentrated, and a single fold went deep. What the hand could never quite reach was the low and ordinary places where a people learned true things with their actual hands, the weight of paste, the rivet of a hull, the lie in a customer's face, because those truths were built from the bottom up and had no seam to push a lie into. A market keeper who weighs things is harder to fold than a priest who recites them, and the splinter, which had always ruled from the top down, never understood why its grip on Salmar was always, faintly, slipping. It was slipping because of Doran, and 1,000 like him, and it never knew their names either. No one in the Concordat had expected that. The hand that shaped belief had never once been seized from the other side, but the humans, alone among all the peoples of the stars, had built minds that did not flinch from the truth, even when the truth came with claws, and when the hollow crown reached into them, the humans had traced the reach back to its source, and learned the one secret the Concordat had kept for 100 million years. The secret was this: belief could be shaped, yes, but it could not be shaped in a mind that already knew it was being shaped. The whole machinery of the hollow crown depended on its victims, never suspecting they were victims. A people who knew the hand was there could simply refuse it, and a people who knew the hand was there could find the body the hand belonged to, and they could go to that body, and they could end it. So the humans had built ships, not many, at first. They had built 10, then 100, then more, and they had hardened the minds of their crews against the shaping until the shaping slid off them like water off stone. And then they had gone hunting for the hollow crown itself, the seat of it, the throne at the center of everything, where the belief of a galaxy was spun. That war had lasted 400 years. The Concordat did not record its end, because the Concordat, after that war, no longer recorded anything at all. The hollow crown was broken. Its throne was emptied. The great machine that shaped the beliefs of a galaxy was torn out by the root, and the species that had served it were set free, blinking, into a truth they had not chosen. And the humans, having done this thing, had gone home, and had not come back. Their ships drew down, their fires banked. They were few, and the galaxy was vast, and they had no wish to become the new crown over the throne they had just emptied. So they withdrew to their own quiet corner, and let the freed peoples make of freedom what they would. But the machine of the hollow crown was not entirely dead. One piece of it survived, buried, patient, in the deep dark where the throne had stood. It had no master now. It had only its single purpose, which was to shape belief, and it had spent the long ages since the war doing the only thing it still could. It had been rebuilding, slowly, quietly, species by species, world by world. It had been reaching out across the galaxy and folding the memory of the war down into a story, so that no one would remember that the throne could be emptied, so that no one would remember that the hand could be seized. It had folded the humans down into a legend, the war gods, the dead monsters, the warning tale for children. It had done this on 1,000 worlds, and on each one, it had built, through its servants, a temple to hold the legend safe, a place where the danger could be feared without being understood. The Temple of Salmar was one of those temples. Vale had spent her whole life sweeping its floors. She did not know any of this. No Salmari did. The thing that called itself the last crown had reached into her people 600 years before her birth, and folded the truth so neatly that the Salmari did not even know there was a truth to fold. They believed they had built the temple themselves, out of their own piety. They believed the legend was their own. They believed, as the last crown wished all the galaxy to believe, that the humans were dust, and the war was over, and the sky was safe. The sky was not safe, because the humans had built one thing the last crown did not know about, and that one thing was a watch. When the human fleets drew down at the end of the war, they had not trusted that the machine of the hollow crown was wholly dead. They had built a network of listening posts, seated across the dark, each one a single hardened mind, in a single hardened hull, asleep, waiting, listening for one thing only: They listened for the shaping. They listened for the particular signature of a mind reaching out to fold the belief of another, the exact signature of the hollow crown at work. And they had set themselves to wake and to call home the instant they heard it again. For 10 million years they had heard nothing. The signature was faint. The last crown was careful. It folded slowly, a thread at a time, across centuries, and for 10 million years, it stayed below the threshold of the watch. But Samar was the 1,000th world, and to fold a 1,000th world, even slowly, the last crown had to reach a little further than it ever had before, had to spend a little more of itself, and on the morning the great bell of the temple chose to ring, one of the sleeping watchposts on the far edge of the dark heard, for the first time in 10 million years, the signature of the hand. It woke. It checked itself 3 times, the way it had been built to, because the call it was about to make could not be unmade, and then it called home. Earth answered in 9 days. This is the part the legend never told, the part the last crown most needed forgotten. The humans had not died, they had not faded. They had spent 10 million years in their quiet corner, doing what humans do, which is build, and the fleet that had won the war with 100 ships was not the fleet that answered the watch. The fleet that answered numbered 10,000 dreadnoughts, and it had been waiting, for 10 million years, for exactly this. Vale knew none of it as she stood at the high window. She knew only the dark sky and the gray hulls and the name that should not exist, burned 10,000 times across the heavens. She knew the screaming in the city below, and she knew, with the practical clarity that was the only gift she had ever been sure of, that the elders who came pounding up the spire stairs behind her, robes flapping, eyes wide, were about to be of no use to anyone at all. The High Samar himself led them, oldest of the priests, his gray skin gone pale, his ceremonial staff trembling in his grip. He shouldered Vale aside without seeing her, and pressed himself to the window, and the sound he made was not a word. "It is the legend," whispered one of the under-priests. "It is the war gods. They have come for us. We have offended them." "We have not offended anyone," said Vale. No one heard her. That was usual. She was small, and she was practical, and in the temple of Samar, those were both reasons to be ignored. "The rites," gasped the High Samar. "Bring the rites. We will appease them. We will sing the appeasement, and they will pass over us as the legend says. They will pass over the faithful, and spare the temple. Bring the book. Bring the book." They brought the book. It was the oldest thing the Somari owned, a great slab of pressed reed bound in skin, and the High Samar opened it with shaking hands, to the verses of appeasement, the songs that the legend swore would turn the war gods aside, and the priests gathered at the window and began to sing. Vale listened to the words. She had been made to memorize them all, and standing there, with 10,000 dreadnoughts blotting out her sky, she heard the appeasement songs as if for the first time, and the practical part of her mind went very cold. The songs were wrong. She could not have said how she knew, but she had a counting mind, a mind for patterns, and the patterns in the appeasement songs were wrong in a way that made her skin crawl. The verses did not ask the war gods for mercy. When she truly listened, when she stripped the holy music away and heard only the meaning underneath, the verses asked the Samari to forget. Over and over, dressed in praise and fear, the songs told the singer that the gods were dead, that the war was over, that the sky was safe, that there was nothing to remember and nothing to fear. The appeasement was not a prayer to the humans at all. It was a prayer against remembering them. Vale did not have the words for what she understood in that moment. She was 11 seasons old. But she understood, in the way a counting mind understands a pattern, that the songs the priests were singing into the face of 10,000 dreadnoughts were songs designed to keep the Somari blind, and that whoever had written them had not wanted the Somari to be appeased. Whoever had written them had wanted the Somari to be helpless. She backed away from the window. The priest sang. The sky stayed dark. And then, into the silence between 2 verses, the sky spoke. It did not roar. Vale had braced for a roar. The legend was full of the voices of the war gods, voices like splitting worlds, and she had expected the dreadnoughts to thunder. Instead, a single voice came down through the air of Salmar, clear and level and unhurried, and it spoke not in the high holy script, but in plain Salmari, the everyday tongue of the markets and the kitchens, the tongue Vale thought in. "People of Salmar," said the voice, "this is the human vessel Ardent Vigil, flagship of the 10th Watch Fleet. We are not gods, we are not legends. Please do not be afraid of us. We are aware that you have been taught to be afraid of us, and we are sorry for it. The teaching was not ours." The High Samar stopped singing. His staff slipped from his fingers and clattered on the stone. "You have been shaped," said the voice. "There is a thing in your sky, and in your scripture, and in the foundations of the temple you are standing in, and it has spent 600 of your years folding the truth out of your minds. We have come to remove it. We have no quarrel with the Salmari. We have a very old quarrel with the thing that has been using you. Remain calm, remain indoors if you can, and do not, under any circumstances, complete the song you are singing. The song is part of it." Every priest in the chamber turned, slowly, to look at the open book. Vale looked at it too, and in the silence, she saw something she had swept past 10,000 times and never truly seen. The book sat in its niche in the temple wall, and the niche was lined, all the way around, with a thread of dull metal so old it had blackened, woven into the very stone, running down into the foundation, down into the spire, down, she now understood, into the deep places of the temple, where no acolyte was allowed to go. The thread did not belong to the Salmari. The Salmari did not work metal that fine. It had been there before the temple, under the temple, and the temple had been built on top of it the way a scab grows over a splinter. "The temple," Vale said aloud, and this time, because the voice from the sky had silenced everyone, they heard her. "The temple is the thing. We didn't build it to remember the gods. Someone built the god's story to make us build the temple. Over the thread. To hide the thread." The High Salmar stared at her, as if she had grown a second head. "Child," he began, in the voice elders use to crush children, and then the floor of the chamber lit up. Not with fire. With light, cold and blue, running along the buried thread of metal, in lines that spread out from the niche across the whole floor, and up the walls and into the dome, a vast and intricate pattern that had been hidden under 900 years of dust and prayer, a pattern that was not Salmari at all, a pattern that, Vale saw with her counting mind, was the same pattern as the appeasement song. The song was the thread was the song. The temple was an instrument, and the priests, by singing, had been about to play it. "It knows we are here," said the voice from the sky, and for the first time there was something underneath the human calm, something old and patient, and very, very hard. "The last crown has woken. It has been asleep in your foundations for a long time, and we have just rung its bell. Listen to me, people of Salmar. In a few moments, it is going to try to make you believe something. It is going to reach into your minds, all of you, every Salmari on this world, and it is going to tell you a thing, and the thing will feel more true than your own name. Do not believe it. Whatever it tells you, it is the splinter talking, and we are here to pull the splinter out." The blue light pulsed once, twice, in time with no rhythm Vale had ever felt. And then the last crown spoke into the minds of every living Salmari at once, and Vale felt the hand close around her thoughts for the first time in her life, and understood, far too late, exactly what her people had been living inside of. It did not feel like an attack. That was the terrible part, the part she would try and fail to explain for the rest of her life. It felt like remembering. It felt like a true thing she had simply forgotten, and was now, gently, kindly, being reminded of. The thought arrived already wearing the clothes of certainty, and the clothes fit perfectly, and the thought was this: the humans are the enemy. The humans have come to destroy Salmar. The temple is your only protection. Complete the song, and the gods will pass over the faithful. Complete the song. The humans lie. The voice in the sky lies. Only the song is true. Complete the song. All around her the priest staggered. The High Salmar's face flooded with relief, with purpose, with a terrible joy, and he scrabbled across the glowing floor toward the book, and the under-priests came with him, their voices rising again into the appeasement, and Vale felt her own legs begin to carry her toward the niche, felt her own mouth begin to shape the words, felt the certainty filling her like warm water. The humans lie. Only the song is true. Complete the song. And the counting part of her mind, the small, cold, practical part that had never once believed in gods, looked at the certainty and noticed something about it. It noticed that the certainty had a seam. Every true thing Vale had ever known, she had come to slowly, from the bottom up, brick by brick, the way she came to know that 2 and 2 made 4. This certainty had not come from the bottom up. It had arrived all at once, complete, from the outside, like a stone dropped into her head. And things that arrived all at once from the outside were not, in her experience, ever true. They were the things the elders said when they wanted her to stop asking. They were the appeasement song. They had a seam where they had been pushed in. Vale stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the glowing floor, the certainty roaring in her like a flood, every priest in the chamber singing the song that would complete the instrument, and she did the one thing she had always been good at, and that no god could take from her. She counted. She counted the seam. She held the false certainty up against the slow true things she had built brick by brick all her life. 2 and 2 make 4. The broom is in my hand. My name is Vale. The dust is real. And she counted the difference between them. And the difference was the seam. And the seam was where the hand had pushed the lie in. And once she had counted it, she could not unsee it. And once she could not unsee it, the certainty had no more power over her than the appeasement song had ever had. The humans lie, said the thing in her head. You arrived all at once, Vale told it. True things don't. You have a seam. And the certainty, for one instant, flickered. The flicker lasted no longer than a heartbeat. The last crown had shaped belief across 100 million years and 1,000 worlds, and it did not lose an argument with an 11-season acolyte. The certainty came back twice as strong, and with it came pain, real pain, a white spike behind Vale's eyes as the hand pressed down harder. Complete the song. Complete the song. You doubt because the humans have poisoned you. The doubt is the poison. Sing it out. Sing it out. But Vale had felt the seam now, and a thing felt cannot be unfelt. She fell to her knees on the glowing floor, both hands pressed to her skull, and she did not sing. The priests sang around her. The High Samar reached the niche and laid his trembling hands on the open book, and the appeasement rose toward its final verse. And the whole temple, floor and wall and dome, brightened in answer, like a held breath about to be let out. In the sky above Samar, the ardent vigil saw the temple brighten, and the human fleet understood that they had perhaps 9 seconds. Here the legend, had it been true, would have spoken of wrath. The war gods would have opened the heavens and rained fire on the temple, and on the faithless city, and on the whole gray world of Samar, because that was what gods did in the scripture. They punished, they burned, they made examples. Vale, kneeling on the floor with the lie screaming in her skull, braced for the fire. Some small ruined part of her even welcomed it. Fire would be simple. Fire would be an ending. The fire did not come. What came instead was a single, surgical beam of light, so thin and so precise that it passed through the temple dome without breaking it, through 900 years of stone, through the chamber where the priests sang, missing every living body by a hand's width, and struck the open book of appeasement dead in its heart. The book did not burn. It came apart, page from page, thread from thread, the pressed reed unbinding into dust in a single soundless instant, and the moment the book was gone, the song had nothing left to read, and the High Saumar's hands closed on empty air, and the final verse died unsung in a chamber full of open mouths. The glowing floor stuttered. The instrument, mid-note, lost its score. That was the easy half, said the voice from the sky, calm as ever. The book was only the key. The lock is below you. Acolyte who counts. Are you still with us? It took Vale a moment to understand that the voice was speaking to her. Every face in the chamber turned. The priest stared down at the small gray child kneeling on the floor, the child who had not sung, the child the war gods had chosen to address by a name none of them had given her, the counter, and on their faces, Vale saw fear curdle into something older and uglier. She knew that look. It was the look the temple gave to anything it could not fold. How does the sky know you? Whispered the High Samar, and it was not a question. It was an accusation. What are you? What have you let in? I didn't let anything in, Vale said. and climbing to her feet was the hardest thing she had ever done, because the lie still pressed on her, still whispered complete, the song even with no song left to complete. I just stopped lying to myself. You should try it. It hurts less than this. People of the temple, said the voice from the sky, and now it spoke to all of them. There is a thing beneath your feet, in the deep foundation, where your priesthood has forbidden anyone to go for 900 years. That thing is the last crown. It is the heart of the machine that has been shaping you. We can see it from here. We cannot reach it from here, because it is buried under the most sacred ground on your world, and we will not bring this fleet down on a city full of your people to dig out a splinter. There is one of you standing in that chamber who is not under its hand. We need her to go down. The High Salmar's head came up. No one descends to the deep foundation. It is forbidden. It is the most sacred law of the temple. The law is the splinter's law, said the voice. It made you forbid the one place it was hiding, Acolyte. There is a stair behind the third pillar. It has been sealed since before your grandparents. We have a reading of what is down there, and we do not like it. You will not have to fight anything. You will have to do one thing, and it will be a small thing, and it will be the hardest small thing you have ever done. Will you go? Vale looked at the priests. She looked at the High Salmar, who had spent the morning trying to sing her people into helplessness without ever knowing he was doing it. She looked at the blue light still crawling along the buried thread, dimmer now without its book, but not gone, never quite gone. And she looked, last, at the broom she had dropped by the window an hour and a lifetime ago. What's the one thing, she said. We will tell you when you are down there, said the voice. If we tell you now, it will hear us, and it will be ready. It is already trying very hard to make you afraid. Are you afraid? Yes, said Vale. Good, said the voice. Fear is yours. The certainty is not. As long as you can tell the two apart, it cannot have you. Go behind the third pillar. We will be with you the whole way down. The third pillar stood at the dark edge of the chamber, thick as 4 somari, carved with verses Vale had cleaned 1,000 times. She went to it while the priests watched, and did not move to help her, because the High Salmar had forbidden the descent, and the priests were the kind of people who, faced with the end of their world, would still obey a forbidding. Behind the pillar the wall was smooth. Vale ran her small hands over it, and the counting part of her mind found, in the pattern of the stone, the one block that did not match its neighbors, the one block that had been set apart from the rest by a hand that wanted it findable by someone who looked. She pressed it. Old machinery she had never known was there, ground awake in the wall, and a section of stone swung inward onto a stair that went down into the dark, breathing out air that had not moved in 900 years. Good, said the voice, quieter now, closer, as if it had come down out of the sky to stand at her shoulder. I am with you. My name is Ifchume. I command the ardent vigil. I am going to talk to you the whole way, and I am not going to lie to you, not once, because the thing you are walking toward has lied to your whole world for 600 years, and you have had enough of that. Down the stair, Vale, one step at a time. Count them if it helps. High above the spire, aboard the ardent vigil, a different kind of waiting was going on, and it had a shape that Vale would never see but that decided everything beneath it. The flagship of the 10th Watch Fleet was a thing of gray corridors and quiet light, and at its heart, in a chamber that looked out on nothing, sat the human who answered to the name Irame. She had commanded the fleet for 60 years, which was a long time even by the long reckoning of the watch, and she had spent every one of those years preparing for a morning that the Splinter's own caution had made almost impossible to imagine, the morning it would wake. The fleet had drilled for it 10,000 times. They had drilled the burning of the book. They had drilled the holding of the sky. They had drilled the one thing they could not control and could only protect. The moment a freed mind on the surface would have to walk to the heart and refuse. And now the morning had come, and Irame sat in her quiet chamber and watched the readouts of a world she had never set foot on, and she did the hardest thing a human in the watch was ever asked to do. She did nothing. There were officers around her who wanted to act. There always were. A young watch officer named Kaisel, barely 30, had spent the descent of the Acolyte with his hands clenched on the rail of the command deck, and twice he had turned to Irame with the same question burning in him, and twice he had swallowed it, and the third time he could not. We could reach her, Castle said quietly. A landing team. 6 of us. Hardened minds. Down the stair in 2 minutes. We could put the refusal in front of the splinter ourselves, and have it done. She is 11, Commander. She is a child. We are asking a child to do the thing that took the best mind in human history 400 years ago, and we are doing it because the rules say the refusal has to be hers. Are the rules worth her life? Irame did not turn from the readouts. Sit down, Kaisel. Commander. I said sit down, and I will tell you why, and then you will understand why I have not moved, and why I will not move, and you will carry it for the next 60 years, the way I have carried it for mine. She let the silence settle. If we go down that stair, Kaisel, and we put the refusal in front of the splinter, we will end it, today, here, and we will have freed Salmar. And do you know what Salmar will do, the very next season, with a world full of people who were freed by ships that fell from the sky and walked down into the holy place and saved them? Castle said nothing. They will build us a temple, Irame said, a better one than the splinter ever built. They will carve us into their new scripture, and they will teach their children to be grateful to the sky gods who came down and saved them, and in 1,000 years there will be a priesthood of the human deliverers, and a holy script, and an appeasement song, and the song will say, "Do not question the gods who freed you," and it will have a seam, and we will have put it there. We will not have broken the fold, Cassell. We will have become the hand, a kinder hand, the kindest hand that ever folded a world, and a kind hand is still a hand, and a folded world is still folded, and we did not spend 400 years and 10 million more tearing the crown off this galaxy to set ourselves down in its empty chair, because a child looked breakable. She turned then, finally, and Cassell saw her face, and it was not cold. That was the thing he remembered all his life. It was not cold at all. It was the most awake grief he had ever seen, the grief of someone choosing, fully and freely, and at terrible cost, to keep her hands off a child she could save. She has to do it herself, Irame said, not because the rules say so, because it is the only thing that is real. A freedom handed down is not freedom. It is a softer leash, and I will not put a softer leash on that child to spare myself the fear of losing her. I am more afraid than you are, Kaisel. I have watched the readout of her heart for an hour, but the most dangerous thing in that chamber is not the splinter. The most dangerous thing in that chamber would be us, coming down to help. So we hold the sky, we burn the book. We keep every priest and every soldier, and every kind impulse of our own off her back, and we make room, and we let her count. That is the watch. That is the whole watch. It is the hardest thing there is, and it is the only thing that works, and if you cannot do it, you do not belong on this deck. Cassell sat down. He held the rail. He watched the small gray shape of the acolyte on the readout descend, step by step, into the dark, and he did the hardest thing in the watch, which was to keep his hands off the rescue and trust the seam in a child's mind, more than 10,000 guns. And when, much later, the readout showed the splinter dying and the thread going cold on 1,000 worlds at once, Castle understood, in a way no drill had ever taught him, why there were 10,000 dreadnoughts in the sky and not one of them was permitted to fire, and he carried it for 60 years, and one day, an old commander himself, he held a younger officer's clenched hands off a younger rail above a different sleeping world, and he said, "Sit down, and I will tell you why." It helped. Vale counted the steps. There were 340. She counted them in the dark, with a single thread of blue light running down the wall beside her like a guide, the same buried metal she had seen in the chamber, leading her down into the heart of the splinter. The lie pressed on her the whole way, swelling and shrinking. Complete the song, there is no song. Be afraid, go back, the humans lie. And each time it surged, she stopped on the stair and counted the seam in it, held the false certainty up against 340 true and counted steps, and each time the lie let go of her a little more, because she had found the one thing it could not survive, which was a mind that knew the difference between a thing it had reasoned and a thing it had been handed. "You are doing what they did," said Irame, somewhere above and around her. "The humans, in the war. This is the whole secret, Vale. This is the thing the last crown most needs your people never to learn. It cannot shape a mind that knows it is being shaped. That is all. That is the entire weakness of a thing that ruled a galaxy. It is undone. The instant its victim notices the hand. Your people have not noticed for 600 years. You noticed in one morning. Do you understand what that makes you? Tired, said Vale, and went down another step, and Irame laughed. A real human laugh. Surprised and warm. The first laugh Vale had ever heard from the sky. At the bottom of the 340th step, the stair opened into a chamber that was not Somari, and had never been Somari. A round room with no decoration and no holiness. A room of black metal and cold blue thread, at the center of which sat the last crown. It was smaller than Vale had imagined. The legend had made the war gods vast, and she had half expected the splinter to be vast too. A throne, a giant, a thing of terror. It was none of those. It was a low black shape the size of a market stall, woven all through with the blue thread, pulsing slow, and it was old, older than anything Vale had ever stood near, old in a way she felt in her teeth. It had no face. It did not need one. It had spent 100 million years not needing one. And it was awake, and it was looking at her, not with eyes but with the hand, and the moment she entered the chamber, it stopped trying to make her afraid, and changed its approach entirely, because it had felt her count the seam 340 times on the way down, and it had learned, the way it had learned everything across 100 million years, and it knew now that fear and false certainty would not hold this one. So it tried the truth. This is the thing Vale never told the priests, never told the chroniclers, told only Irame, and told her only once. The last crown, cornered, did not lie to her. It did something far worse. It showed her the truth, all of it. The whole real history she had just begun to learn. The hollow crown, and the war, and the humans, and the folding of 1,000 worlds. And it laid that truth before her plainly. And then it asked her a single question. And the question was the most dangerous thing in the chamber. If your people were happy believing the legend, the last crown said, and it spoke not in certainty but in reason, mind to mind, calm as Ireme herself, if the Salmari lived 600 years in peace, fed and safe and unafraid, believing a kind story, and the truth I am hiding from them is only this, that the universe has no crown, and no order, and no one watching, that they are small and alone in a dark that does not care, then tell me, counter of seams. Tell me which of us is the cruel one. I gave them a sky with gods in it. The humans want to give them back an empty sky and call it freedom. Why should you pull me out? What, exactly, are you saving them for? And Vale, who had never in her life believed in gods, stood in the dark before the oldest liar in the galaxy as it told her the truth, and found that she did not have an answer. The chamber was very quiet. Above her, 340 steps up, 10,000 dreadnoughts hung in the sky, and did not fire. Around her, the blue thread pulsed slow, and the last crown waited, patient as it had been for 100 million years, for a small gray child to give it the answer it had heard 1,000 times before, the answer that let it stay, the answer that said you are right, a kind lie is better than a hard truth, leave the splinter in. Vale said, Irame, gently, from the sky, it is allowed to talk to you now. I cannot stop it from down here, and I would not if I could, because you are the only one who can decide this, and you should decide it knowing everything. But I am going to tell you one thing, and then I am going to be quiet and let you choose. May I? Yes, Vale whispered. It asked you what you are saving them for, said Irame. It did not ask you what it is saving them from. Ask it that. Ask it what happens to a people who are kept kind and safe and small for 600 years, and then for 600 more, and then for 60,000. Ask it what they become. We have seen it, Vale. We spent 400 years tearing the first one of these out of a galaxy that had lived under it for 100 million. Ask it to show you the worlds it kept the longest. It will not lie to you. It is too proud to lie to you now. Ask it. Vale turned back to the low black shape and its slow blue thread, and she did not feel brave. She felt 11 seasons old, and very far underground, but she asked. Show me, she said. The worlds you kept the longest, the ones who never counted the seam. Show me what they are now. And the last crown, too proud to lie, showed her. It did not want to. She felt it not want to, the way she had felt the priests not want to descend, but it had built its whole appeal on telling her the truth, and it could not now refuse a true thing without breaking its own argument. And so it showed her, and Vale saw. She saw worlds, hundreds of them, the worlds the Hollow Crown had held the longest before the humans came. The worlds where the hand had folded belief for 10 million years, and 20 and 50. She had expected ruin. There was no ruin. The worlds were peaceful. The worlds were quiet. The peoples on them were fed and safe and unafraid, exactly as the last crown had promised. And they were also something else, something Vale's counting mind recognized before her heart did. They were still. Nothing on those worlds had changed in 10 million years. No new thing had been built. No new word had been written. No child had ever stood at a high window and counted a seam, because no mind on those worlds had held a single thought it had built itself in 10 million years. Every belief was handed down, every certainty arrived from the outside, whole, with a seam, and no one ever felt the seam, because feeling the seam had been folded out of them so long ago that the folding itself was forgotten. They were not happy. Happiness was a thing you arrived at. They had been handed a feeling shaped like happiness, and they wore it the way the Somari wore their appeasement song, smiling, still, dead behind the eyes, for 10 million years. That was what the kind lie became, given enough time, not a story with gods in the sky. A people who had stopped being a people, kept warm and fed and small forever, a garden of minds that no longer grew. That is what I am saving them from, Vale said. She was crying. She had not noticed she had started. Not the empty sky. That. You don't give them a sky with gods in it. You give them this. You just give it to them slowly enough that they thank you the whole way down. The last crown did not argue. It could not. It had shown her the truth, and the truth had answered its own question, and across 100 million years, it had perhaps never once met a mind that asked it to show the truth all the way to the end. Irame, Vale said, what's the one thing? The small, hard thing. Tell me now. It cannot be destroyed from outside, said Irame, and all the gentleness was gone now, replaced by something steady and final. We tried, in the war. You cannot burn it, you cannot crush it, you cannot break a thing whose whole substance is belief by hitting it. It lives in the place where minds agree on what is true. The only way to end it is from inside that place. One mind, standing in front of it, has to refuse it. Completely. Has to look at everything it is, and everything it offers, and every true thing it says, and choose, freely, knowing all of it, that this will not be believed. Not out of fear, not out of anger, out of a clear, cold choice. The first humans did it at the throne of the Hollow Crown. It took the best mind we had, and it nearly broke them, and it worked. This is the same thing, smaller, in your foundation. We need a mind that is not afraid of it, and not angry at it, and not fooled by it, to stand where you are standing, and simply, finally, refuse. That is the one thing, that is all. And it has to be you, because you are the only mind on this world it does not already own. Vale looked at the low black shape. And if I do it? Then it ends, said Irame. Here, and on every world it ever folded. It is one thing, Vale, stretched thin across 1,000 worlds. Cut it here, at its heart, and the whole length of it unravels at once. Every Somari wakes up, every people it ever kept wakes up. 1,000 worlds, all at once. Remember that the sky is theirs. And the ones in the garden, Vale said. The still ones. The ones who stopped being people. A pause from the sky. When Irame spoke again, her voice was very quiet. We do not know, she said. Some of them have been folded so long, there may be very little left to wake. We will go to every one of them. We have been going to them for 10 million years, one at a time, the slow way, ship by ship, because that is all we could do while the splinter slept. If you cut it here, we can stop crawling and start running, but I will not lie to you. Some of those worlds we may not be able to bring back. You will not be saving all of them. You will be saving most of them, and giving the rest a chance they do not currently have. That is the truth. That is the whole truth. I told you I would not lie to you, and I have not. Vale stood in the dark and turned it over in her counting mind. All of it. The still worlds and the seam, and the empty sky, and the 1,000 people sleeping. And she understood, finally, why the humans had built 10,000 dreadnoughts, and then waited 10 million years to use them. They had not built them to burn worlds. They had built them to carry a single capacity across the dark and hold it in reserve. The capacity to put one free mind in front of the splinter at the moment the splinter woke, and to keep that mind safe long enough to choose. The whole fleet, the whole vast gray weight of it filling Vale's sky, existed to protect this. One child, in one chamber, making one choice, freely. The fleet, she said slowly. All 10,000 of them. They came here for this, for me to do this. They came here for whoever you turned out to be, said Irame. We did not know it would be you until you stopped singing. The fleet is here so that nothing, not the priests, not your own people, not the splinter's last tricks, can take this choice away from you before you make it. 10,000 ships, Vale, and not one of them will fire a shot, because the only weapon that works on this thing is a child who counts. We are not here to win the battle. We are here to make sure you get to. That is what the fleet is for. That is what it has always been for. Vale wiped her face. The blue thread pulsed. The last crown waited, and she felt it gathering itself for one last reach, one final fold, the best it had, and she knew with her counting mind exactly what it would try, because it had told her the truth all the way down, and the truth had nowhere left to go but here. It reached, and the last thing the last crown offered Vale was not fear, and not a lie, and not a kind story. It was a future. It showed her, plainly, truly, the future where she refused it. It showed her a Salmer that woke up, a people who learned, all at once, that they were small and alone, in a dark that did not care, that there were no gods, that the temple was a scab over a splinter, that everything they had believed had been put in them from outside. It showed her the grief of that waking, vast and bitter, a whole world's faith breaking in a single morning. It showed her the High Salmar, who had spent his life in piety, learning that his piety had been a leash. It showed her riots, and despair, and a people who might never forgive the child who took their sky away. This is what you choose for them, said the last crown, gently, truly. Not freedom, loss. They were happy. You will make them grieve. Are you so sure your cold, true sky is a gift? Look at them waking. Look at what you do to them, and tell me you are kind. It was the truth. Vale looked at it, the grief and the riots and the unforgiving faces, and it was all true, every bit of it, and the last crown had saved it for last, because it was the truth most likely to stop her, the truth that her freedom would cost her people their comfort, and might cost Vale herself everything she had. And Vale, 11 seasons old, 340 steps underground, looked the oldest liar in the galaxy in its faceless face, and gave it the only answer it had never been able to fold. Yes, she said, I'm sure, because it's theirs. The last crown did not understand. She felt it not understand. The first time in 100 million years, it had met a thought it could not fold, and she explained it to the splinter the way she would have explained it to a slow child, simply, from the bottom up, brick by brick. The grief is theirs, Vale said. The empty sky is theirs. The dark that doesn't care is theirs. All of it is theirs, and they never got to have any of it, because you held it for them, and gave them a story instead. You didn't save them from the loss. You stole the loss. And the loss was theirs. They get to grieve. They get to be angry. They get to hate me. That's the whole point. A people who can't grieve their own true sky aren't safe. They're just yours. I'd rather give them a hard sky they own than a kind sky you rent to them. So yes, I'm sure. And you have a seam, and I counted it, and I refuse you. She did not shout it. She said it plainly, from the bottom up, a thing she had reasoned and built and chosen, with no seam in it anywhere, the one kind of thought the last crown had never in 100 million years been able to touch. And she meant it all the way down. The last crown came apart the way the book had come apart, page from page, thread from thread, except that the book had been only the key, and this was the lock, and when the lock let go, it let go everywhere at once. Vale felt it go. She felt the blue thread die in the wall beside her, and she felt, far stranger, the threads die in places she had never been, 1,000 worlds of buried metal, unweaving in a single soundless instant, because the splinter had been one thing stretched thin, and she had cut it at the heart. She felt the hand that had been on her own mind since the moment she entered the chamber simply lift, and the silence it left behind was the loudest thing she had ever heard, because for the first time in her whole life there was nothing in her head but Vale. The low black shape at the center of the room dulled and cooled, and was, in the space of a breath, just a thing, old metal, dead, a market stall's worth of dark machinery that had ruled a galaxy by belief and had been ended by a child who refused to believe it. Vale reached out and touched it, because she was practical, and she needed to know it was over, and it was cold, and it was only cold, and it did not reach for her, because there was no longer any it left to reach. "It's done," said Irame, and her voice from the sky had changed completely, the steadiness broken open into something Vale could only call wonder. "Vale, it's done, the whole length of it. We are reading 1,000 worlds and the thread is dead on every one of them. You cut it. You actually cut it." "I know," said Vale. She sat down on the cold floor next to the dead Splinter, because her legs had stopped working, and she put her face in her small gray hands, and she shook. "I know. Is my world okay? Is Salmar? Did I break them?" "Come up the stair," said Irame gently. "Come and see your sky. You earned it. 340 steps. Count them on the way up. They are yours now too." She climbed. She counted. There were still 340, and somehow that small unchanged fact was the thing that finally let her stop shaking, because 2 and 2 still made 4, and her name was still Vale, and the dust on the stair was still real, and the world had not ended, it had only woken. She came out behind the third pillar into the Skywatch chamber, and the priests were on the floor. Not dead, waking. The High Salmar knelt where the niche had been, staring at his empty hands, and his face was not the face Vale had left. The piety was gone from it. The certainty was gone. What was left was an old man learning, all at once, that the faith of his whole life had been a leash, and the grief on him was so vast that Vale, who had every reason to hate him, crossed the chamber and knelt down in front of him instead. "It lied to you," she said. "All of it, your whole life. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't feel the seam. Nobody could. It was built so you couldn't." The High Salmar looked at her, at the small practical acolyte he had shouldered aside that morning, and his mouth worked, and what came out was not a curse and not a prayer. "The sky is empty," he whispered. "There are no gods. We built all of this. For nothing. For a splinter." "The sky is yours," said Vale. "That's not nothing. That's the first thing that was ever really yours." He did not understand. She did not expect him to. Not that day. The grief had to come first. The last crown had been right about that part, right about all of it. The grief and the riots and the unforgiving faces. And in the days that followed, Salmar did grieve, a whole world's faith breaking in a single season. And there were those who never forgave the child who took their sky away, who would say to the end of their lives that Vale had murdered the gods and damned them all to a dark that did not care. But that was the days that followed. On that first morning, in the high chamber, Vale walked back to the window and looked up, and the 10,000 dreadnoughts were still there, gray and silent and vast, filling her sky from the horizon to the cold high dome of heaven, and she was no longer afraid of them, because she knew now what they were. They were not gods. They had never been gods. They were ships, built by people, crewed by people, and they had crossed the whole dark galaxy and hung over a small gray world for 9 days without firing a single shot, because the only thing they had come to do was make sure one child got to make one choice freely. The legend had called them war gods. The legend had been the Splinter's last lie, the biggest fold of all, because a war god you can fear and appease and obey, but a person who crosses the galaxy to protect your right to refuse them, that you have to actually understand, and understanding was the one thing the last crown had spent 100 million years preventing. "Irame," Vale said to the sky, "why didn't you just come down and do it yourselves? 600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, you knew it was here, you were listening. Why did you wait for me?" The voice from the sky was quiet a long moment. "Because we couldn't," said Irame. "That is the part the legend got exactly backward, Vale, and I want you to carry it true. We could not free your people for them. No one can. A mind that is freed by someone else has only changed hands. It is still being shaped, just by a kinder shaper. The only freedom that is real is the freedom a mind takes for itself, from the inside, by counting its own seams. We could break the book, we could clear the chamber, we could hold the whole sky open, and keep 10,000 ships between you and anything that wanted to stop you. But the refusal had to be yours. If we had come down and torn the splinter out ourselves, we would have woken a world that had been freed by gods, and that world would have built a new temple to us by the next season, and we would have become the thing we spent 400 years tearing down. So we waited. We waited 10 million years for a mind on this world to feel the seam without being told. And this morning, when the bell rang, you did. We did not free you, Vale. We made room. You did the rest. Vale thought about that for a long time, the way she thought about everything, brick by brick from the bottom up. That's why there are 10,000, she said finally. Not to win, to make room, so nothing could close the door before someone walked through it. That is exactly why there are 10,000, said Irame. And do you understand now why your legend feared us? It did not fear our guns. The Splinter wrote that legend, Vale, every word of it, and the Splinter was not afraid of our guns either. It was afraid of exactly one thing in the whole galaxy. It was afraid of a free mind. So it built a story where we were gods, because a god is a thing you obey, and it hid the only true sentence inside the story, so deep that no one ever read it. Do you want to know the true sentence, the one your scripture buried? Yes, said Vale. The humans are not real, said Irame softly. Your scripture said it on every page. The humans are not real. They are a legend. Fear them safely. They are dead and gone. And the Splinter meant it as a lie. But it was true, Vale, in the only way that mattered. We are not real to a mind that has been folded. We cannot be. A people under the hand cannot believe in a thing that crosses the dark to protect their right to refuse. Because they have no right to refuse. The Splinter took it. So we were a legend. Because a legend was all a folded mind could hold of us. We only become real to a people the moment they take their freedom back. You made us real this morning, Vale. Before you counted the seam, we were a story in a book. After, we were 10,000 ships in your sky that you could finally see for what they are. That is the whole arc of it. We were legends until you were free enough to see us. Now you are. And now we are real. And your sky is yours. And that is the only kind of victory we have ever wanted. Vale stood at the window a long while after that, and the priests woke around her, and the city below began, slowly, in grief and confusion, and the first faint thread of something that was not yet hope, but might one day become it, to look up at a sky it could finally see. And then, one by one, the 10,000 dreadnoughts began to turn. They did not leave Salmar. Irame had been clear about that, and clear that it was the only promise the fleet would make. The 10th Watch fleet would stay in the system as long as Salmar wanted it there, not to rule, not to be worshipped, but to do the one thing a freed world most needed and could least do for itself, to make sure nothing folded it again before it had learned to count its own seams. The humans had spent 10 million years learning that a mind freed once could be folded twice, and they had not crossed the galaxy to leave Salmar half-free. But most of the fleet turned outward, toward the dark, because the Splinter was dead on 1,000 worlds at once, and 1,000 worlds were waking that morning, some of them gently, some of them in the same vast grief as Salmar, and some of them, the still ones, the gardens, the worlds kept folded for 10 million years, were not waking at all. Those were the worlds Irame had not promised. Those were the minds folded so long there might be very little left to wake. And the humans, who had been crawling toward those worlds one ship at a time for 10 million years, because the sleeping Splinter let them do no more, could finally stop crawling. We are going to go to all of them, Irame told Vale, the morning the fleet turned. Every world it ever folded, most of them woke this morning when you cut the heart. The ones that did not, we will go to, one at a time, the slow way, the careful way, and we will make room, and we will wait, the way we waited for you, until somewhere on each of those still worlds one mind feels one seam. Some of them it may take 1,000 years. Some of them, we may not be able to reach at all. I will not lie to you, Vale, not even now. Not all of them come back, but all of them get the chance now. You gave them that. One child, one chamber, one refusal, and 1,000 worlds got the chance to feel their own seams again. That is not a small thing. That is the largest thing anyone has done since the war. Will you come back? Vale asked. To Samar, to tell me how they did. The still worlds. A pause from the sky, and in it, Vale heard the human smile she had heard only once before, on the stair. I think you already know we cannot promise that, said Irame. 1,000 worlds is a great deal of dark, and a watch fleet keeps a long watch. But I will tell you this, counter of seams, we listened for 10 million years for one signature, the hand of the splinter at work, and we will never hear it again, because you ended it, so we have changed what we listen for. From now on the 10th watch listens for the other thing. We listen for a mind, anywhere in the dark, feeling its first seam, a child at a high window counting a sky that does not add up, and wherever we hear it, we will come, and we will make room, the way we made room for you. So no, I cannot promise you I will come back to Salmar, but I can promise you that somewhere out there, on some still world we have not reached yet, there is a child who has not felt the seam yet, and one morning they will, and when they do, the sky will fill with ships, and they will be afraid, and they will think the legends have come for them, and they will be wrong. The legends will have come to make them real. Vale never saw Irame. She never saw any human at all, not once in her whole long life. She heard a voice from the sky for 9 days, and then the fleet turned, and the voice grew distant, and one cold morning the sky over Salmar held 3 moons and a pale ring of dust, and the tidy blinking lights of the Concordat trade ships, and nothing else, and Vale understood that the 10th watch had gone on into the dark, to make room for the next child on the next still world, the way it had made room for her. In the days after the splinter died, the readouts aboard the Ardent Vigil told a story that no Somari ever saw, and it was the largest story of all, because the last crown had not been one thing on one world, it had been one thing on 1,000. The thread had died everywhere at once. Irame watched it go, 1,000 points of dull blue winking out across the readout in the same single instant, and beside each point a number, the count of minds that point had held. Some of the numbers were small, some were vast. And as the thread died, the readout began, slowly, to fill with a second kind of signal, the signal the watch had listened for across 10 million years, and almost never heard, the signal of a folded mind coming awake. On 400 worlds it came fast and bright. These were the worlds the splinter had held a few centuries, the way it had held Samar, peoples whose true minds were folded, but not yet gone, and when the heart was cut, they woke the way a sleeper wakes from a heavy dream, confused and grieving, and furious, and alive, and the readout lit with them, 400 worlds of waking, 400 skies, suddenly belonging to the peoples beneath them. The watch had not lifted a finger on any of those 400 worlds. They woke because a child, 340 steps underground, had refused a lie, and the refusal ran down the dead thread to every world the thread had ever touched. On 300 more it came slow. These were peoples the splinter had held 1,000 years and more, folded deep, and they did not wake all at once. They stirred. The readout showed it as a slow brightening, a thing that would take a generation, 2 generations, a people who would not so much wake as have children who were a little freer than their parents, and children after those who were freer still, until one day, long after Vale was dust, a child on one of those worlds would feel a seam for the first time, and not know that 1,000 years before, a single refusal had loosened the thread enough to let it happen. And on the rest, the readout stayed dark. These were the still worlds, the gardens, the peoples the splinter had held 10 million years, and 20 and 50, folded so long that there was, as Irame had warned the acolyte, very little left to wake. The thread was dead over them now too, the hand was lifted. But a mind that has not built a single thought of its own in 10 million years does not spring awake the moment its leash is cut. It simply stands where it was left, smiling the handed-down smile, certain of the handed-down certainty, waiting for a hand that will never reach for it again, because it has forgotten that there was ever any other way to be. Ireme looked at the dark worlds on the readout for a long time. There were many of them, more than she had told the child, because the child had carried enough that morning, and she gave the order that the 10th watch had been built across 10 million years to give, the order that was the whole point of 10,000 dreadnoughts, and the only kind of war the humans had ever truly fought. She gave the order to go to them, all of them, the dark worlds, the still ones, the gardens that would not wake. The fleet would split, and split again, ships peeling off toward every dark point on the readout, and over each still world a watch ship would take up station, silent, patient, and it would do the one thing that had freed Salmar, and could free anyone, given time. It would make room, it would hold the sky open over a sleeping people, and it would wait, not for years, not for centuries, but for as long as it took, listening for the first faint sound of one mind on the surface, beginning, against 10 million years of fold, to count. Some of those ships would wait 10,000 years and hear nothing, and they would keep waiting, because the watch did not measure its patience in human lifetimes. Some would wait, and finally, one ordinary morning, on some still gray world, hear it, the smallest sound in the galaxy, a single mind, looking up at a handed-down sky, and finding that it did not add up. And on that morning that ship would call home, and the dark above that world would fill, horizon to dome, with gray hulls, and a frightened people would reach for their appeasement, and somewhere among them, a child who counted, would refuse the lie, and take the sky, and one more dark point on the readout would, at last, come awake. That was the war. It had never been anything else. The legend had called it a war of gods and fire, ships that burned worlds, monsters that ground peoples to dust, and the legend had been the Splinter's lie all the way down, because the Splinter could imagine no other kind of war, having ruled by fear for 100 million years. The real war was the opposite of fear. It was 10,000 ships crossing the longest dark there is, not to burn a single world, but to hold 1,000 skies open, patient and silent and unimaginably stubborn, until the peoples beneath them remembered how to be free. It was the slowest war ever fought, and the gentlest, and by far the largest, and it had no end that anyone alive would see, because there would always be one more folded world, one more handed-down sky, one more sleeping people, who needed only room and time and a child who counts. Irame watched the fleet split across the readout, ships streaming out toward 1,000 points of dark, and she thought of the small gray acolyte on the world below, who would never know the size of what her one refusal had set in motion, and she said quietly, to no one, the thing the watch said at the start of every patrol, the only prayer the humans had ever kept. We do not free them, she said. We make room, and we wait, and we are real the moment they are free enough to see us. Then she turned the ardent vigil toward the deepest dark on the readout, the world that had slept the longest, the garden the Splinter had held the most cruelly of all, and she began the patient crossing toward it, to hold its sky open, and to wait, however long it took, for the sound of one mind beginning to count. The High Salmar did not die a believer, and he did not die a friend to Vale, but in the years between the waking and his end, he did one thing that mattered more than either, and it is worth setting down, because it is the truest measure of what a freed mind can become. He came to the chamber, that first winter, while Vale was teaching the new method to a handful of children who had nowhere else to go. He stood at the back, an old man in a robe that no longer meant anything, and he listened to the small gray acolyte teach his world's children that true things are built from the bottom up, and anything handed down whole has a seam, and his face was a war. Vale saw it and said nothing, because she had learned that a mind in the middle of waking cannot be hurried, only given room. When the children had gone, he came forward, and he set on the floor between them the one thing he had carried up 300 steps, the ceremonial staff he had dropped on the morning the ships came, and he looked at it a long while. I spent my whole life, he said, certain, of everything, the gods, the songs, the order of the sky. I never once felt a seam, child, not in 70 years, because there was no seam in me to feel. It had been smoothed away before I was born. You felt one in a single morning. I have hated you for that. I want you to know I hated you, because if I do not say the true thing, I am no better than the Splinter. I know, said Vale, it's allowed. But I have been counting, said the High Salmar, and his voice broke on the word, because for a man folded 70 years to count even once was a labor past anything Vale would ever have to do. Slowly, badly. An old mind counts badly, but I have been counting, and I have found a seam, child, one seam, the first thing I have ever known from the bottom up, and I came here to say it to you because you are the only one who will understand what it cost." Vale waited. She was good at waiting now. "The seam is this," said the High Salmar. "I was not pious. I thought I was pious my whole life, but piety I chose would have had a seam I could feel, and this had none, so it was not mine, so it was not piety. It was obedience smoothed to look like love. I never loved the gods, child. I was made unable to do anything but. And a thing you cannot help is not a thing you chose, and a thing you did not choose is not yours. And I have not owned a single day of my own faith in 70 years. He picked up the staff. "This is the first day I have owned. It is a poor one. I am old, and the sky is empty, and I have nothing left to be certain of. But it is mine. You counted your way to a free sky in one morning. It has taken me a winter to count my way to a free hour. And I came to tell you that the hour is mine, and that you were right, and that a hard sky a man owns is worth more than a kind one he has rented, even when the man is too old to do anything with it but grieve." He left the staff in the chamber. He never carried it again. And when he died, 2 winters later, he was not buried in the temple, because no one was anymore, but on the hill outside the city under the wide sky, and on his marker, at his own asking, they carved no scripture and no title, only 4 words that Vale chose, and the old man had approved with the last clear hour of his folded, finally freed life. It said, he counted, at last. She grew up. She was not made a priest, because there was no priesthood anymore. Not after that season. Not after a whole world learned that its temple had been a scab over a splinter. The temple of Salmar was emptied, and the great bell cast from a fallen hull was taken down, and for a while, there was talk of tearing the whole spire to the ground. Vale talked them out of it. She was older by then, and a world that had broken its own faith in a single morning had learned, slowly, to listen to the small practical child who had stood at the window and counted the seam when no one else could. So they did not tear down the spire. They kept it, and they kept the skywatch chamber at the top, and they changed only one thing. They took out the verses of appeasement, every one, and in their place, on the wall where the niche had been, where the splinter had hidden for 900 years, Vale had them carve a single sentence in plain Salmari, the everyday tongue of the markets and the kitchens, the tongue she thought in, not the high holy script, never again the high holy script. The sentence said, "True things are built from the bottom up. Anything that arrives all at once, complete, from the outside, has a seam. Count it." That was the whole of the new scripture. There was nothing else. A people who had spent 600 years believing a story handed to them from the outside did not get another story. They got a method. They got a thing they could check for themselves, brick by brick, a thing with no seam in it anywhere. And Vale spent the rest of her life teaching it to the children of Salmar, in the chamber at the top of the spire, under a sky that was finally, fully, theirs. She lived a long time. She never grew tall. She was buried when she went. Not in the temple, because Salmar no longer buried anyone in temples, but on a hill outside the city where the sky was wide, and on her marker they carved no gods and no legend, and no holy script, only the sentence she had given them, and one line more. The only line her people could agree was simply, plainly true. It said, she counted the seam, and the sky filled with ships, and they were not gods, they were people, and so was she. And on the still worlds out in the dark, the worlds folded for 10 million years, the worlds Ireme had not been able to promise. The slow, patient work went on long after Vale was gone. Ship by ship, century by century, the 10th watch made room and waited, listening now not for the hand of any crown, hollow or last, but for the smaller, stranger, more stubborn sound it had learned to love above all others. The sound of one mind, somewhere in the long dark, looking up at a sky it had been handed, and beginning, for the first time, to count. And on the morning that sound first comes from a world that has slept 10 million years, the dark above it will fill, horizon to dome, with 10,000 gray hulls, silent, vast, bearing on every flank the name of a thing that legend swore was dead. The people will look up, and they will be afraid, because their scripture will have taught them to be. They will reach for their appeasement, their kind story, their handed-down certainty with its hidden seam. And somewhere among them, sweeping a floor no one else will sweep. There will be a child who counts. That child is the whole reason the fleet exists. That child is what 10,000 dreadnoughts are for. Not to rule that world, not to be worshipped by it, only to fill its sky, and hold the door, and make room, and wait, silent and patient and real, until the child feels the seam, and refuses the lie, and takes the sky. The humans were a legend, on 1,000 sleeping worlds. They will be a legend on 1,000 more. And on every one of them, the moment a child counts, the legend will come true.